Welcome to Mindful Media 101, the space where healing begins, where broken hearts find their voice, and where your story finally feels seen. If you've been told you're too much, if you've ever felt like your love was a burden, or if someone walked away and left you wondering what was wrong with you, this message is for you. Because the truth is, you weren't hard to love, they just weren't ready. Let's talk about it. You were never the problem. They said you were too much. Too emotional, too intense, too clingy, too loud, too quiet, too soft, too sensitive, too much of everything. But what they really meant was, they weren't ready. They weren't ready to receive the kind of love you gave, the loyalty you showed, the way you poured your soul into someone else's empty cup, without ever asking for anything back. You weren't hard to love. You just loved someone who couldn't handle it. You were the mirror they couldn't handle. Here's the hard truth most people never realize. When someone isn't ready to be loved, they will resent the person who loves them the most. Because love is a mirror. Real love reflects everything they're afraid to see in themselves. Their emotional immaturity, their inability to commit, their fear of vulnerability, their unhealed trauma. You didn't break them. You just made them see how broken they already were. And not everyone wants to face that kind of truth. It wasn't rejection, it was reflection. When they pulled away, when they blamed you, when they made you feel like the issue, it wasn't rejection, it was reflection. You reflected the type of love they weren't brave enough to give. You reflected the emotional honesty they weren't ready to feel. You reflected the depth they were too afraid to drown in. You didn't lose them because you weren't enough. You lost them because your love required them to rise. And they weren't willing to. So they left. And they blamed you. But the truth? They were running from their own shadows. Real-life reflection, Jonah's story. Jonah loved someone deeply, someone who said all the right words, but always stayed emotionally distant. He tried to be patient. He tried to understand her walls. He tried to love her into safety. But the more he gave, the more she withdrew. When she finally left, she said, "You're just too intense. I can't breathe around you." It crushed him. For months, Jonah believed he loved wrong. But therapy helped him see the truth. She didn't leave because I loved her too much. She left because she didn't know how to love herself, and I reminded her of that. Lesson: people will project their insecurities onto your heart. Let's make one thing clear. People don't always leave because of something you did. Sometimes, they leave because of everything they refuse to deal with in themselves. You were never the enemy. You were the light. But when someone is still committed to darkness, they'll shut the blinds and call you too bright. Speech balloon affirmation break. Speak this over your life. Say it with me. I am not too much. I am not the problem. I am not the reason they couldn't love deeply. I was just a mirror they weren't ready to look into. Affirmation break. Speak this over your life. Say it with me. I am not too much. I am not the problem. I am not the reason they couldn't love deeply. I was just a mirror they weren't ready to look into. It's time to stop apologizing for the way you love. Stop apologizing for your heart. Stop watering yourself down to fit into someone else's emotional limits. Stop pretending you don't care when you do. You weren't hard to love. You just loved someone who needed healing. And healing was a journey they refused to take. That's not your fault. That's not your responsibility. The deepest pain wasn't the breakup, it was feeling unseen. Sometimes, the heartbreak isn't from them leaving. It's from knowing they never really saw you in the first place. You opened your heart. You showed your wounds. You gave them the version of you that took years to build. And somehow, they still misunderstood it. Called it too emotional. Called it too needy. Called it dramatic. When really, it was just honest. When you speak love and they respond with silence. You said, "I need to feel safe." They heard. "You're trying to control me." You said, "I need consistency." They heard. "You're too demanding." You said, "This hurt me." They heard. "You're overreacting." Over and over again, you spoke from your heart. And they met you with misunderstanding. Not because your needs were wrong, but because they were emotionally unavailable. When someone isn't emotionally mature, they won't understand emotional honesty. They'll confuse transparency with manipulation. They'll mistake vulnerability for weakness. And they'll call your boundaries walls. Just because they're used to chaos. Their response had more to do with them than with you. They didn't reject you. They rejected the responsibility of loving someone fully. They couldn't give what they never learned to receive. They couldn't offer what they never cultivated in themselves. And when faced with your real, raw love, they froze. Not because you were too much, but because they were never ready to grow. Real-life reflection, Zara's wake-up call. Zara was always the fixer in relationships. She thought if she just loved people harder, they'd finally feel worthy. Her last relationship nearly broke her. He ghosted her after a year of working on himself. Zara was devastated, but in therapy, her counselor told her, "You don't heal people by breaking yourself. You don't get love by proving you deserve it. You get love by giving it to yourself first." And that changed everything. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. You are not here to beg for bare minimum effort. You are not here to teach someone how to treat you. You are not here to convince someone that you are worthy of staying. You are not a second chance. You are not an emotional rehab center. You are not the one who has to carry both hearts in the relationship. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Let this be your turning point. This is the chapter where you stop blaming yourself. This is the moment where you say, "I gave everything I had, and I still wasn't met with effort. That doesn't mean I gave too much. It means they couldn't receive what I offered. You weren't hard to love. They just weren't healed enough to love you back. And that's not your burden to carry anymore." Sometimes, they didn't stay. Not because you were hard to love, but because they were afraid of being fully seen. Because when someone loves you unconditionally, they feel exposed. They feel unworthy. They feel terrified that they'll lose you the moment you see who they really are. So instead of staying and risking intimacy, they leave. To feel in control again. But their exit, it wasn't your ending. It was your beginning. People leave when love requires growth. True love challenges us. It asks us to look inward. It demands maturity, consistency, effort, and presence. And not everyone is ready for that. So they choose comfort over connection, familiarity over growth, fear over vulnerability. They leave. Not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't carry the weight of what your love revealed in them. Real life story, Elijah's awakening. Elijah loved her quietly, patiently, fully. He showed up when she needed him. He listened more than he spoke. He gave her space to feel safe. And still, she left. Not for someone better, but for someone easier. Someone who didn't ask her to grow. Someone who wouldn't see past the mask she wore. It took Elijah years to realize. She didn't walk away because I loved her wrong. She walked away because my love asked her to rise, and she wasn't ready to rise with me. Speech balloon affirmation break. If they had to leave to find themselves, then I was never their destination, I was just their mirror. I don't chase what can't stay. I attract what grows with me. Key: their exit gave you back yourself. The truth no one tells you is this. Their leaving may have saved you. It gave you space to hear your own voice again. Reconnect with your values. Fall back in love with your peace. Discover how strong you really are. Because sometimes, the ending is not the punishment. It's the permission you needed to start again. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Let's be clear. They didn't walk away from you. They walked away from themselves. From the version of life that required them to show up fully. To be vulnerable. To evolve. When someone leaves after tasting real love, it isn't because they didn't feel anything. It's because they couldn't handle everything it made them feel. And in that moment, when they chose silence instead of truth, distance instead of effort, someone else instead of healing, that wasn't rejection. That was the universe redirecting your life. Toward someone, somewhere, or something better. Real-life story, Nia's exit wound. Nia gave everything. She listened with her whole body. She supported him when he had nothing. She believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And just when it felt like they were building something real, he left. No explanation. Just gone. Weeks later, she found out he was with someone new. Someone who didn't ask him to open up. Someone who didn't see the broken parts. Nia was crushed. She thought, why wasn't I enough? But therapy taught her this. The version of you that required truth scared the version of him that only knew how to run. And slowly, Nia realized. She wasn't abandoned. She was being free. Sometimes people don't stay. Because staying means they have to face everything they've been avoiding their whole lives. It means showing up even when it's uncomfortable. It means growing, even when it's painful. And not everyone is brave enough to do that. Candle hash. You deserve a love that stays and grows. You don't deserve half effort. You don't deserve hot and cold. You don't deserve someone who makes you question your worth every other week. You deserve consistency. You deserve clarity. You deserve growth with someone who's not afraid to evolve beside you. Their inability to stay wasn't your flaw. It was their limit. Speak this over your life. I was not too much. I was just asking for what I deserve. They didn't stay, and that's okay. Because real love doesn't fear growth. It embraces it. I am not abandoned. I am aligned. I didn't lose them, I found myself. It's not just the person you mourn, it's the future you built in your mind. One of the hardest parts of heartbreak. You're not just grieving who left. You're grieving the future you were planning with them. The laughs you thought you'd share next year. The travels you dreamed about. The healing you believed would happen together. The someday that never came. That's what hurts the most. The unlived life you thought was real. But here's what you need to hear. That imagined future. It was built on hope, not on reality. And you deserve a love that matches both. Your mind will try to rewrite the story, don't let it. In the quiet moments, your brain will lie to you. It'll say, they weren't that bad. Maybe if I had just been more patient. Maybe they'll come back one day. But that's not healing, that's surviving. Your brain is trying to protect your heart from reality. But you cannot heal what you refuse to accept. And the truth is, they left because they weren't ready, and you deserve someone who is. Real life story, Leo's empty wedding date. Leo met her at 23. She was magic, spontaneous, radiant, emotionally unavailable. But he believed love would fix it. He planned their future. He bought a ring. He booked the venue. She ghosted him 2 months before the wedding. No explanation. No closure. Leo was shattered. But later, in therapy, he realized. I wasn't in love with her. I was in love with the idea of who she could become. And I was addicted to trying to fix her. That day, he began mourning not just her, but the story he'd written in his mind. And when he let go of that fantasy, he finally made space for someone real. Letting go of someone doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally chose yourself. It means you decided to stop begging someone to become who they promised. And you started honoring who you already are. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You didn't give up. You woke up. You saw the truth. You were trying to force something that wasn't mutual. You were carrying a connection that required both hands. But they were never holding it with you. Letting go wasn't quitting on love. It was choosing real love over the illusion of potential. Affirmation break. I release the future I imagined. And I make room for the future I deserve. If they couldn't choose me at my most real, they never truly saw me. Letting go isn't loss, it's alignment. I don't chase people. I attract peace. They left. And for a while, it felt like everything crumbled. Your identity. Your confidence. Your ability to trust again. But let this be your reminder. They left and you survived. And now, you're still breathing. You're still here. You're rising. You don't owe your story to the one who walked away. You owe it to yourself to reclaim your power and write a new chapter that has nothing to do with them. You were broken, But you were not defeated. You cried. You questioned everything. You replayed every moment. You thought it was the end. But every time you got up again, every time you answered the phone, went to work, took care of yourself, you were choosing power. You were reclaiming every inch of strength they thought they'd take with them. And that's the beginning of your healing era. They took themselves out of your life, that's their loss. You were not abandoned. You were released from the weight of trying to prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it. They walked away, but they didn't take your light. They just made room for it to shine somewhere it can be celebrated, not questioned. Repeat this. They didn't take my power. They revealed it. They didn't break me. They broke the illusion. They didn't define me. I do. Real life story, Dani's return to herself. Dani loved him like poetry, deeply, patiently, honestly. But every time she asked for respect, she got silence. Every time she needed support, he disappeared. When he ghosted her after a 2-year relationship, she thought she'd never recover. But one night, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, puffy-eyed and exhausted, she whispered, "I'm done mourning someone who's still alive." And from that day forward, she made one vow. I will stop chasing closure from the person who caused the wound. She started working out. She started creating. She started laughing again. Not for revenge. Not for attention. But because she came back home to herself. This is what power looks like, choosing you. Real power isn't loud. It's not revenge. It's not pretending you're fine when you're not. Real power is saying, I'm healing, and I'm doing it without needing an apology. I am not begging for clarity from someone who refused to give it when it mattered. I choose peace over chaos. I choose growth over games. I choose me. Affirmation break, say this to yourself. I no longer shrink to be loved. I no longer chase those who walk away. I no longer hold space for people who let go of me. I reclaim my time, my joy, my voice, my heart. You waited for them to return, but now, you return to yourself. For a while, you waited. For a message. For an explanation. For them to realize what they lost. You hoped they'd see the damage and come back to fix it. But what if the healing doesn't come from them returning? What if the healing comes from you choosing yourself? Because the truth is, you are no longer waiting for closure. You are becoming it. You were the constant they couldn't appreciate. The sad truth is, they didn't lose you when they left. They lost you long before that. The moment they started taking you for granted. The moment they treated your consistency as convenience. The moment they made your loyalty feel like a trap. The moment they saw your softness as weakness. But look at you now. Still standing. Still soft. Still strong. Still you. That's power they'll never understand. Real life story, Amora's awakening. Amora's love was unshakable. She stayed through breakdowns, apologies, and empty promises. She believed in him more than he believed in himself. But one day, she asked herself, why do I keep bleeding for someone who wouldn't even give me a bandage? So she stopped answering his calls. She booked a solo trip. She started journaling, walking, eating in silence. And one night, under a quiet sky, she wrote, I was never waiting for him. I was waiting for the version of me that finally knows she's enough. When you stop waiting for someone to love you properly, you start loving yourself the way you always deserved. And that's when the shift happens. When you stop surviving the pain and start rising with purpose. This is your rebirth season. You don't need them to return to feel whole. You don't need an apology to heal. You don't need their love to prove your value. You are enough without validation. You are strong without pretending. You are worthy without question. And now, it's time to become your own safe place. The one who doesn't abandon you. The one who holds space for your softness. The one who never leaves. Affirmation break. I choose peace over people pleasing. I am not waiting for closure, I am becoming it. I am no longer who they broke, I am who I'm becoming. I am my own safe space. Trust. It's not just a word, it's a bridge. A bridge that once collapsed beneath you. And now, every time someone tries to walk across, you hesitate. You wonder, will they leave too? Will they break me like the last one? You flinch at kindness. You second-guess affection. You overanalyze every silence. Because when you've been betrayed, even the good starts to feel dangerous. But here's the truth. You can learn to trust again without losing yourself. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about rebuilding. You don't need to forget what they did. You don't need to pretend it didn't hurt. You just need to rebuild. Not for them. Not even for love. But for you. So your heart doesn't grow hard. So your joy doesn't dim. So your future doesn't pay the price for someone else's betrayal. Real life story, Layla's trust wall. Layla met someone new after a year of healing. He was kind, consistent, everything her ex wasn't. But every time he showed up, she froze. She questioned his intentions. She pushed him away. Until one night, he gently asked, "Are you punishing me for someone else's mistakes?" That question hit her like thunder. She cried, not because she was broken, but because she realized how long she'd been protecting a wound that no longer defined her. From that night on, she chose to try. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, but intentionally. Trust doesn't mean you forget the past. It means you choose not to live there anymore. It means you believe in the possibility of love, even if it once left you shattered. How to trust again without losing yourself. Set boundaries, not walls. Protect your peace, but don't shut everyone out. Trust actions, not just words. Let consistency speak louder than charm. Communicate openly. Share your fears. Real love will listen. Heal at your own pace. There is no deadline for trusting again. Affirmation break. I am not defined by who hurt me. I choose trust, with wisdom and grace. I allow love in, one safe step at a time. I protect my peace without abandoning my heart. You can be cautious without becoming cold. Let's talk about the fear. That tight feeling in your chest when someone gets too close. The way you pull back when emotions run deep. The reflex to question their every move. It's not because you're broken. It's because you've been through something that tried to convince you you were. But here's the truth. You don't have to turn your heart to stone to protect it. You can stay soft and still be safe. You can love again and still have boundaries. You can try again without losing your wisdom. Your mind will say, "Don't risk it." Your soul will whisper, "But what if it's safe this time?" When someone new shows up, present, kind, consistent, your fear will scream, "This is too good to be true." But your intuition, your healing self, your deeper truth, will say, "Let it unfold. Let it be different this time." Not everyone is here to hurt you. Not everyone is your past. Real life story, Malcolm's quiet leap. Malcolm hadn't dated in 3 years. His last relationship left scars, gaslighting, abandonment, shame. He met someone at work. She was gentle, patient, curious. But he couldn't shake the fear. He kept thinking, what if I open up and it ends the same way? One day, she looked him in the eye and said, "You don't have to trust me today. But I'll keep showing up until your heart feels safe again." That was the beginning of everything. Not because she was perfect, but because she didn't demand his trust. She earned it. Sometimes love doesn't crash into your life. Sometimes it knocks quietly, gently, asking for permission to come in. And when you answer, when you give it a chance, you don't lose your power, you reclaim it. What it means to love again, differently this time. This time, you won't overextend. You won't abandon yourself. You won't carry both hearts. This time, you'll go slow. You'll communicate clearly. You'll pause when your nervous system needs time. And if the right one comes along, they'll understand. Because real love doesn't rush you. It waits. It respects. It honors your pace. Affirmation break. I no longer fear love, I fear settling for less than I deserve. My heart is healing, not hardened. The right one will not be scared by my wounds. I am open, slowly, wisely, beautifully. You loved them. Fully. Freely. Fearlessly. You didn't hold back. You didn't play games. You didn't water yourself down. And even though it didn't last, even though they left, even though your heart was shattered, you do not have to regret your love. Because love, in its purest form, is never a mistake. Loving deeply is not foolish, it's rare. This world teaches us to be detached, to keep it casual, to avoid getting too involved, to act like we don't care, even when we're breaking inside. But you chose depth. You chose real. You chose connection. And yes, it hurt. But it also proved that you are capable of something so many people are afraid of. Showing up with your whole heart. Real life story, Eli's unapologetic love. Eli loved her with everything he had. He wrote her letters. He held her hand through storms. He even sat through her silence when she pushed him away. When she left, people told him, "You should have seen it coming. You loved too hard. Next time, don't give so much." But Eli disagreed. "No," he said. "If I had to do it again, I'd still love her like that. Because how I loved says everything about me and nothing about her choices." That's the power of love without regret. You didn't lose, you loved. You didn't lose someone. You loved someone. And that love came from your highest self. It came from honesty, from softness, from courage. They may have left, but they can never erase what was real. They can never take away the purity of what you gave. Voiceover moment, poetic plus proud. You loved, and they weren't ready. That doesn't make your love wrong. That makes it rare. You showed them a kind of tenderness that most people spend a lifetime searching for. And even if they couldn't hold it, that love is still your legacy. Release the shame. Hold the beauty. You don't need to be ashamed for caring. You don't need to feel weak for loving. You don't need to regret choosing someone who wasn't ready. Because now, you're wiser. You're more aware. You're more you. Love didn't break you. It revealed you. Affirmation break. I do not regret the love I gave. My love was real, even if they couldn't receive it. I honor my softness, it is not a weakness. I release regret and hold on to the beauty of what I felt. You were the brightest thing in a dark chapter of their life. Sometimes they leave without saying thank you. Sometimes they walk away without ever acknowledging what you gave them. But just because they didn't recognize your light, doesn't mean you didn't shine. You brought presence. You brought patience. You brought peace into their storm. And even if they didn't stay, even if they weren't ready, they'll always remember how you made them feel. You were unforgettable even if they never said it. Your love was a blessing, not a burden. It's time to stop apologizing for your softness, for being too available, for checking in too often, for loving without hesitation. That wasn't desperation. That was devotion. That wasn't neediness. That was your soul, being real, being brave, being you. Real life story, Sienna's silent goodbye. Sienna never got closure. He just stopped texting, stopped showing up, started acting like she never mattered. But in her heart, she knew. I showed up. I never played games. I gave him the best version of me. And that's something no one can ever take away. And that truth, that's how she healed. Not through his apology, but through her own validation. Your value doesn't decrease because someone left. Your love doesn't lose meaning because someone didn't keep it. You were light in their darkness. And whether they ever admit it or not, they saw it. And when they remember you, they'll remember the warmth, the calm, the way they felt more human around you. You gave your best, and that was enough. Your love was not wasted. It was honest. It was generous. It was healing. Whether or not they understood it, that love shaped them, softened them, touched them. And one day, they'll remember the one who never gave up on them, until they gave up on themselves. That's not your regret. That's your proof. Proof that you were the real thing. Affirmation break. I gave them my light even when they couldn't hold it. I don't regret showing up fully. I release the pain. I hold the beauty, the love I gave lives on, in me. Not everyone gives you the goodbye you deserve. Some leave in silence. Some leave with lies. Some leave like you never even mattered. And you're left holding the pieces. Not just of the relationship, but of everything you thought was real. You wait for an explanation. You beg the universe for clarity. But it doesn't come. So what do? When closure never arrives, you give it to yourself. You can heal without their apology. Let go of the fantasy where they come back. Admit everything. And tell you it was all a misunderstanding. Let go of the need for them to get it. Let go of the idea that only they can give you peace. Because the truth is, your peace isn't waiting on their words. It's waiting on your decision to stop waiting. Closure isn't something they give, it's something you create. Closure isn't a conversation. It's not an apology. It's not a perfect final chapter. Closure is this: deciding to stop replaying the betrayal, choosing to move forward without understanding everything, learning to breathe again even with unanswered questions. It's not about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself. Real life story: Joel's empty inbox. Joel was ghosted by someone he thought he'd marry. No warning. No explanation. Just gone. He sent message after message. Wrote letters. Sat with his phone every night, waiting for a response. Nothing. Until one morning, exhausted from the silence, he wrote a note to himself. Today, I stop chasing closure from the person who shattered me. Today, I become my own answer. And that's the day the healing finally started. They might never say they're sorry. They might never admit they hurt you. They might never look back. But you're still allowed to heal. You're still allowed to grow. You're still allowed to begin again. Even if you never hear "I'm sorry," you can still say "I'm free." Your freedom doesn't need their permission. They don't get to control how long you stay in pain. They don't get to decide when you heal. They don't get to own your story anymore. This is the moment you take your power back. Not with revenge. Not with rage. But with release. You let go not because they deserve peace, but because you do. Affirmation break. I don't need their closure to write my next chapter. Their silence will not steal my peace. I am allowed to move on without answers. I am not waiting. I am rising. Sometimes the truth you need is that you'll never get one. You won't always get to know why they stopped loving you, why they ghosted you, why they chose someone else, why they changed overnight. And the absence of answers can feel like a second heartbreak, because your heart keeps asking, was it me? But the most freeing thing you can ever tell yourself is, I don't need to know why they left. I just need to know I'm still worthy of being loved. Letting go of the fantasy of closure. Closure is romanticized. It sounds like one last honest conversation, tears and apologies, finally hearing the truth. But real life rarely gives you that. And even when it does, it often brings more confusion, not clarity. Sometimes, the most powerful closure is choosing not to need theirs. Choosing to find peace in your own truth, without dragging yourself through their chaos again. Real life story: Maya's quiet peace. Maya loved him deeply, and when he left with no warning, she spiraled. She thought, if I could just get one more conversation, I could finally move on. One day, she bumped into him. He smiled casually, like nothing happened. Gave a vague excuse. Walked away. And that's when it hit her. This wasn't about closure. This was about accepting who he always was, not who I wanted him to be. That day, Maya stopped needing answers. She stopped checking his socials. She stopped romanticizing the memory. She chose silence over confusion. She chose herself. They may never acknowledge your pain. They may never admit what they did. They may never change. But your healing is not dependent on their growth. Your freedom is not tied to their remorse. The moment you accept what happened, not what you wish had happened, is the moment you start to rise. Give yourself the closure they never could. Write the letter you never got. Say the goodbye they were too cowardly to give. Cry, scream, heal without their permission. And then, release them. Not for them, for you. Because every second you spend waiting for their words is a second stolen from your future. Affirmation break. I am not waiting for clarity from the one who caused the storm. Their silence is not my punishment, it's my protection. I give myself the peace they couldn't give me. I am no longer chasing closure, I am choosing freedom. After the heartbreak, after the tears, the silence, the healing, there comes a moment when you look in the mirror and whisper, I'm ready for something real. Not something temporary. Not someone who runs. Not someone who only loves you when it's easy. You're ready for love that's mutual. Love that chooses you. Love that grows, stays, and sees you completely. And the truth is, that kind of love starts with you. You attract what you believe you deserve. If you think love has to be earned, you'll settle for people who make you prove your worth. If you believe love requires sacrifice, you'll give too much, too fast, to people who give too little. But when you believe love should feel like safety, softness, growth, that's what you'll start calling in. You don't manifest the love you want. You manifest the love that matches your self-worth. Real life story, Avery's shift in standards. Avery used to think she had to fix people to be loved. She stayed in situations where she was breadcrumbed, ignored, taken for granted. Until one night, journaling under soft candlelight, she wrote, "What if I stopped choosing people I had to convince?" So she did. She started healing her self-image. She stopped texting first every time. She stopped explaining her worth. And months later, she met someone who didn't just say the right things. He did them. He matched her energy. He chose her, fully. Not because she chased it, but because she became it. How to attract real love. Love yourself out loud. Don't wait for a partner to treat you right, show the universe how it's done. Say no to almost right. Close the door on half-hearted love. It only delays the real thing. Trust timing, not pressure. Stop rushing what's meant for you. Love that's forced is never free. Heal your patterns. Pay attention to the people you attract, they often mirror the love you think you deserve. The love you want isn't hiding from you. It's waiting for the version of you who no longer tolerates less. The moment you raise your standards, you raise your vibration, and the right person will meet you there. Not make you come down. You deserve love that doesn't confuse you. Love that doesn't punish your openness. Love that brings peace, not anxiety. Love that honors the healing you've done. Not love that breaks you to pieces, but love that helps you rebuild. Affirmation break. I am no longer available for inconsistent love. I attract what aligns with my highest self. I choose relationships that bring peace, growth, and clarity. The love I deserve is on its way, and I'm already ready. Chasing love will always leave you empty. Read that again. If you're always the one initiating, overgiving, proving your worth, you're not being loved. You're being evaluated. And love, real love, it doesn't feel like a job interview. It feels like exhale, like belonging, like home. So stop running after love that makes you feel like you're not enough. And start aligning with love that meets you where you are and stays. Real love isn't loud, it's consistent. It doesn't play games. It doesn't disappear and reappear. It doesn't punish you for being soft. Real love sends good morning texts without you asking. Real love shows up when you're sick, tired, and quiet. Real love listens, remembers, holds space. And the most beautiful part, it doesn't feel like survival. It feels like peace. Real life story, Jalen's shift from chasing to choosing. Jalen used to think effort meant chasing. He always reached out first, planned every date, fixed every issue before it was even discussed. Until he got tired. One day he asked himself, if I stopped pouring so much, would they still show up? So he did. And they didn't. That hurt, but it also healed. Because Jalen realized, I don't want to chase love anymore. I want to receive it. Feel it. The love you crave doesn't require chasing. It requires clarity. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to earn attention. You don't have to shrink to fit. The right love will find you. When you finally stop searching for it in the wrong places. You're not too much, you've just been asking the wrong people to see you. You've always been enough. Too loyal. That's just honesty in a world that plays it cool. Too emotional. That's your depth, not a flaw. Too intense. That's your passion, not a problem. You weren't too much. They were just too little. Now, your job is to stop handing over your magic to people who don't know how to hold it. Affirmation break. I release the need to chase love. I trust that what is meant for me will not confuse or abandon me. I am no longer shrinking for anyone's comfort. I am attracting a love that honors my depth. They rejected you, left you unread, chose someone else, acted like you never mattered, and for a while, you questioned everything. You stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m. asking, "What did I do wrong?" But here's the truth you've been waiting for. You weren't too much. You weren't hard to love. You just loved someone who wasn't ready. And now you rise. Rejection doesn't define you, it refines you. Let's rewrite the narrative. Rejection doesn't mean you're not enough. It means the door was closed so you wouldn't settle. It means you were protected from what couldn't grow with you. So instead of asking, why did they leave? Ask yourself, what did their leaving make space for? More peace. More clarity. More you. Their exit was the beginning of your evolution. Read that again. They didn't break you. They broke the illusion that you had to keep proving yourself to be loved. And now, you don't bend anymore. You don't beg anymore. You don't settle anymore. You rise. You walk with wisdom. You speak with self-respect. You trust your intuition. Because every version of you that stayed for too long, that version was still learning. But the version you are now, unshakable. Real life story, Nia's comeback. Nia was ghosted after 6 months of giving her whole heart. She spiraled, blaming herself. Until one day, while journaling, she wrote, "What if his rejection wasn't proof that I wasn't good enough, but proof that I had outgrown people who can't match my energy?" She stopped calling. She stopped wondering. She started building. Now she's in therapy. She's launching a podcast. She's learning to love herself loudly, unconditionally. And that old version of her, she thanks her for choosing to rise, even when it hurt. They thought they were walking away from a heartbreak. They didn't know they were waking up a warrior. You don't chase. You don't shrink. You don't sit in rooms where you're not seen anymore. Because you now know. Rejection isn't the end. It's the redirection to something greater. Becoming unshakable means you don't take everything personally. You don't base your worth on who stays. You don't need revenge, you need growth. You don't chase people, you chase peace. Unshakable doesn't mean emotionless. It means centered, rooted, wise. It means you can feel the pain without letting it make your decisions. Final affirmation break. I am not my rejection, I am my recovery. I am rising in power, not pain. Every ending gave birth to a new version of me. I am unshakable because I now choose me first. They left. Without warning. Without closure. Without ever really explaining why. And somehow, even after all the red flags, you still sat in the silence, blaming yourself. You asked, was I too clingy? Too emotional? Too available? Too much? But what you didn't ask was, why did I think their inability to love me had anything to do with my worth? When they leave you with questions you can't answer, there's something cruel about being left without reason. It's not just the pain, it's the doubt. Because when people disappear, they don't just take their presence. They take your sense of peace with them. You replay every moment, every conversation, every text you sent and reread. Maybe if I hadn't said that. Maybe if I'd just been more understanding. Maybe if I hadn't cared so much. But here's the truth they never told you. It wasn't you. It was never you. Story expansion. Cases spiral of self-blame. Casey gave everything to someone who never asked the right questions, only took what he offered. When it ended, they gave no reason. Just silence. Casey stopped eating for days. Unfollowed, refollowed, checked their page at midnight. Wrote letters never sent. He once wrote in his journal, "It's like I'm fighting a ghost. Trying to fix something that broke, but I don't even know what cracked first." And then, one night in a quiet room, he whispered, "Wait, why am I trying to repair someone else's damage with pieces of myself?" That night was the first night he slept in peace. The truth about being too much. Let's clear this up forever. You weren't too emotional. You were just emotionally honest in a world that numbs itself. You weren't too intense. You were just passionate with someone who couldn't handle depth. You weren't too available. You were simply present for someone who never showed up for themselves. You weren't hard to love. They were just unable to love anything they couldn't control. Mindset shift, from blame to boundaries. What if the lesson wasn't about being less of anything, but about never giving all of yourself to someone who gave you fragments? What if the breakup wasn't your fault, but your breakthrough? Start asking, why did I think I had to earn love in the first place? Who taught me to confuse emotional labor with emotional connection? Your healing begins when the questions change. They weren't confused, they just didn't want to choose you. But don't mistake rejection for reflection. Their inability to love deeply doesn't say anything about your value. It reveals everything about their capacity. You were the light, they couldn't hold it. You brought depth to someone who only understood surface-level connection. You brought care to someone who was numb inside. You brought truth to someone living in denial. And that scared them. You weren't the mistake. You were the mirror they couldn't stand to look into. And that's not rejection. That's redirection. Let them go. Let the questions fade. Let the story end where it's meant to. Because one day, you'll meet someone who doesn't see your softness as weakness. Someone who doesn't just tolerate your depth, they meet you in it. Until then, love yourself like you always wanted them to. Healing practice prompt. Write the letter you'll never send. Take 15 minutes. Write a letter to the person who hurt you. But don't send it. Let it out. Tell them what they never stayed to hear. Say the things you wish you had said. And when you're done, burn it. Rip it. Tear it up. That's how you take your power back. Expanded affirmations. I release the need to blame myself for someone else's choices. I am not too much, I was simply with someone who was too little. I no longer shrink to fit in places I've outgrown. My love is not a burden, it's a blessing for the right heart. Part 1 Key takeaways, recap style. Their confusion doesn't equal your unworthiness. Silence can be cruel, but clarity begins inside you. You don't need their closure to start healing, just your own honesty. You weren't hard to love. They just weren't ready. Your softness isn't a flaw. It's your superpower. Let's talk about the weight. The invisible burden you've been carrying. Not just the heartbreak, but the responsibility for everything that went wrong. You became their therapist, their fixer, their second chance, their emotional shock absorber. And when they left, you didn't just grieve their absence. You grieved the person you became to keep them happy. But here's the truth. That weight was never yours to carry. You took the blame because it felt familiar. Maybe you grew up learning that love had to be earned. That being good meant keeping everyone else comfortable. That your needs were too much. That silence was safer than speaking up. So when you entered a relationship with someone emotionally unavailable, you didn't walk away. You adapted. You performed. You became smaller to make them feel bigger. You calmed your storm so they wouldn't leave. But the reality is, you weren't in love. You were in survival. Real life story, Amira's emotional backpack. Amira was always the strong one. She never cried in front of anyone. She handled her partner's moods, traumas, and outbursts like a pro. But when he ghosted her after a year, she didn't just miss him. She missed the version of herself she created to keep him stable. In therapy, her breakthrough came when her counselor asked, Why are you grieving the person who drained you? That question hit like a wave. And that's when she realized, I'm not grieving him. I'm grieving who I had to become just to be loved by him. Emotional labor not equal to emotional intimacy. Being needed is not the same as being loved. Fixing someone is not the same as being supported. Being the calm in their chaos doesn't mean they'll do the same for you. Here's what often happens. You regulate them, but they dysregulate you. You listen deeply, but they never ask how you feel. You sacrifice rest, peace, and truth all to avoid conflict. But that's not love. That's codependency. Love doesn't require that you lose yourself. You became their emotional safe space. But they never built one for you. You were their journal, their nurse, their healer. But they never became your partner. And when they left, you didn't just feel rejected. You felt tempted. How trauma bonds you to pain. It's not always love that keeps you attached. It's the trauma of giving everything and getting nothing. You think, if I just do more, they'll see me. If I love harder, they'll come around. If I forgive again, maybe this time it'll be different. But deep down, you know, you're loving from a wound, not from a place of worth. Signs you were carrying what wasn't yours. You were constantly anxious when they pulled away. You apologized first even when they hurt you. You made excuses for their bad behavior. You felt exhausted after every conversation. You lost touch with your needs just to avoid conflict. These aren't just habits. They're survival mechanisms. And it's time to unlearn them. Healing practice prompt. Give it back visualization. Close your eyes. Picture all the emotional weight you carried. Their trauma. Their anger. Their insecurities. Their silence. Their blame. Now imagine lifting it out of your heart. Place it in a box. Close it. Walk it back to them. And say, this was never mine. I release it. And walk away. Feel the lightness. Feel your soul standing taller. That's what healing tastes like. Real life story, Daniel and the guilt that was never his. Daniel was with someone who constantly accused him of not doing enough. Even though he worked 12-hour shifts, planned dates, sent good morning texts, and always apologized first. When she left, she told him, I just don't feel emotionally safe with you. It crushed him. But months later, in a moment of stillness, he realized, I was never the unsafe one, she just never felt safe anywhere. That was the moment he stopped blaming himself for someone else's emotional wounds. You don't have to keep dragging their pain behind you. You don't have to break yourself into pieces to keep people whole. The weight you carried for them, that was never your burden to begin with. It's okay to lay it down now. Affirmation break. I release the emotional weight that doesn't belong to me. I am not responsible for healing others at the cost of myself. My worth is not measured by how much I endure. I honor my peace, I no longer carry what drains me. They walked away. Suddenly. Quietly. Without looking back. And it felt like everything stopped. Your breath. Your peace. Your future, the one you imagined with them. But their leaving wasn't the end of you. It was the beginning of something sacred. You learning that love doesn't beg. Love doesn't chase. Love doesn't destroy you to stay. Their absence wasn't rejection. It was revelation. What their leaving really meant. Let's pull back the curtain. What does it really mean when someone leaves without effort, without fight, without trying? It doesn't mean you were unworthy. You were too much. You loved wrong. It means they weren't ready for the kind of love that demands vulnerability. They didn't have the emotional depth to match your presence. They were never truly invested, only entertained. And the silence they left behind, it's not punishment. It's proof that they never intended to stay. You weren't abandoned, you were freed. Let that sink in. You weren't thrown away. You were released from something that couldn't nourish you. You were pulled out of a space where your love was being wasted. You were redirected away from someone who only ever saw you as an option. Sometimes, the biggest blessing is the goodbye you didn't see coming. Because now, you're no longer waiting on a love that never wanted to grow. Reframing the story, What if their leaving was the lesson? What if their departure was the answer to a prayer you didn't know you made? You loved them more than they deserved, but it taught you what real love should look like. You gave too much, but it showed you your heart's capacity. You stayed too long, but you walked away stronger. It wasn't a failure. It was an awakening. Real life story, Layla and the day she stopped asking why. Layla begged for answers. She reread their texts, analyzed every conversation, looked for closure in all the wrong places. Until one day, at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, she said out loud, "What if I stop needing his reason and start creating mine?" That question broke the cycle. She blocked his number, deleted the draft apology she'd been editing for weeks, started journaling instead of waiting. And she wrote, "He left, but I stayed. I showed up. I gave love. I was real. That's who I am. And I'm not ashamed of that." Voiceover, soothing plus honest. The ones who leave you quietly were never planning to stay loudly. You weren't abandoned, you were redirected. They left because they couldn't meet you in the places you were willing to go. That doesn't make you wrong. That makes you rare. You were ready, they weren't built for that kind of depth. Here's the truth you keep forgetting. You were ready. For commitment. For honesty. For a relationship that wasn't just romantic, but real. But they didn't even know how to show up for themselves, let alone someone else. And you can't build a future with someone still running from their past. Love letter healing prompt. Rewrite the narrative. Take 15 minutes and write this sentence at the top of a blank page. What their leaving really meant was. Then finish it in your own words. No filters. No blaming yourself. Just truth. What did it teach you? What did it reveal about them? What strength did you find after they walked away? That's your closure. That's your clarity. Expanded affirmations. Their exit wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Their leaving made space for a deeper love. I no longer chase what can't choose me back. The end of that story gave birth to the beginning of mine. I'm not angry they left. I'm grateful I learned. They didn't reject you, they revealed themselves. Sometimes unanswered questions are your clearest answers. Their leaving gave you the space to rebuild in truth. You weren't abandoned, you were realigned. This wasn't the end, this was the clearing before the breakthrough. Let's pause for a moment and acknowledge something important. Something you may have questioned in the dead of night. Something that kept you up, wondering if it all even mattered. Yes, the love you gave was real. Even if they couldn't receive it. Even if they didn't appreciate it. Even if they walked away like it meant nothing. That doesn't erase the truth. You loved with your whole heart. And that's powerful. That's rare. That's beautiful. Love isn't measured by the outcome, it's measured by the intention. Your love was real, not because it lasted, but because it was honest. You showed up. You gave. You felt deeply. You stayed when it was hard. You tried when you could have quit. That matters. Stop telling yourself the story that it was all for nothing. It wasn't. The love was real. The ending was disappointing. But that doesn't mean your effort was meaningless. Don't let their immaturity redefine your capacity to love. They may have mishandled your heart. They may have ghosted you, breadcrumbed you, blamed you. But their actions don't invalidate your depth. Their immaturity doesn't make your emotional openness a mistake. You were just ahead of them. In healing, in honesty, in growth. You weren't wrong to love them. They just weren't ready to be loved in the way you did. Real life story. Sophia's love was never wasted. Sophia dated someone for almost a year. She cooked for him, planned dates, wrote him letters he never responded to. When he left, he said, "You're too much for me. I need space." She carried that phrase for months. Too much. Until one day, she found her old journal. In it, she read all the things she had done in love. Thoughtful surprises, forgiveness, support. And she cried not because she missed him, but because she realized, wow, I gave so much love, and I never once betrayed myself to do it. I wasn't too much. I was right. He just wasn't ready. Don't erase your story just because it ended painfully. Yes, it ended. Yes, it hurt. But it was still love. You laughed. You shared dreams. You imagined a future. That's not weakness. That's bravery. Loving someone in a world that teaches detachment is revolutionary. Don't apologize for caring. Don't regret showing up fully. Even if they didn't say thank you. Even if they disappeared. Your love wasn't wasted. It softened them. It showed them something real. Even if they weren't ready to hold it, they'll never forget it. And the right person will look at your love and say, I've waited my whole life for this. Signs the love you gave was real. You remembered their little details. You apologized even when you weren't at fault. You supported their growth, even when yours was on pause. You stayed present during hard conversations. You didn't use their flaws as weapons, you loved them through it. That kind of love doesn't disappear. It echoes. Even when the relationship ends. Healing practice prompt: write a love inventory. Sit down and write a list of everything beautiful you gave in that relationship. Moments of kindness. Times you supported them. Ways you showed love. Forgiveness you gave. How you held space for their healing. When you're done, look at that list and say aloud, I gave real love. I am proud of my heart. This is how you begin to stop blaming yourself for someone else's inability to receive it. Voiceover, emotional plus uplifting. They may have forgotten your love, but your soul remembers who you were in it. You stayed soft. You stayed true. You stayed present. That's something most people never learn how to do. Affirmation break. My love was a gift even if they didn't know how to receive it. I am proud of the way I loved, even when it hurt. My heart is not broken, it's awakened. I will never regret being real in a world that hides. Love isn't wasted just because it ends. Your depth isn't weakness, it's courage. You gave someone a front row seat to your heart, that's priceless. One day, someone will see your love as the rare gem it truly is. The love you gave was real. And so are you. Let's be honest. When they walked away, you didn't just feel hurt. You felt responsible. You searched for signs. You replayed everything. You asked yourself, was I too intense? Should I have been more patient? Did I love them too much or not enough? You took the fall for someone else's silence. You made yourself the villain in a story where you were just trying to love deeply. But let me remind you of something powerful. You are not to blame for someone else's emotional unavailability. You didn't ruin anything. You just loved someone who wasn't ready to receive it. Blame is the brain's way of searching for control. When things fall apart, the mind tries to make sense of the chaos. And because you're compassionate, you turn the lens inward. If I can just figure out what I did wrong, you think, maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can undo the ending. But here's the hard truth. Some people will hurt you no matter how careful you are. You could have been perfect. And it still wouldn't have been enough for someone who never knew how to hold love. You're carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you. You didn't force them to ghost you, cause their emotional unavailability, create their fear of commitment, make them abandon their promises. Their behavior, it's a reflection of their maturity, not your value. You're blaming yourself for how they handled their own brokenness. Let that sink in. Real life story, Elijah and the self-blame spiral. Elijah loved someone who was emotionally unpredictable. One day, they were all in, the next, completely distant. He tried harder. Read relationship books. Went to therapy alone. Even blamed his childhood for loving wrong. But after they left, his therapist said, "You didn't love wrong, Elijah. You just loved someone who didn't love themselves. That's not your burden." And that truth saved him. Why we blame ourselves, the hidden root. Self-blame often comes from childhood. If you grew up in chaos, you learned to take responsibility for keeping peace, for keeping others happy, for making sure no one left. So now, when a relationship ends, your first instinct is, what did I do wrong? But now, you're not that child anymore. You're an adult who deserves peace, not punishment. You didn't push them away. They were already walking. You didn't ruin the relationship. You were the one trying to save it. You were enough. They just were. Blame keeps you trapped, accountability sets you free. Let's be clear. Blame equals it was all my fault. Accountability equals here's what I've learned and how I'll grow. There's a big difference. You're allowed to reflect. But don't carry guilt for someone else's patterns. You're allowed to grow. But not from a place of shame, from a place of self-awareness. Healing journal prompt, from blame to boundaries. Answer this. What have I been blaming myself for that was never mine to carry? Then write. What actually happened? What role you truly played? What they chose that you couldn't control? What you'll no longer own emotionally? Let your pen be your release. You deserve to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for staying too long, hoping they'd change, loving blindly, not leaving at the first red flag. That wasn't weakness. It was hope. It was heart. It was human. And now, you know better. Not because you failed, but because you felt. Voiceover moment, empowering plus gentle. You don't have to keep apologizing for who you were when you didn't know better. You don't have to blame yourself for giving love to someone who didn't deserve it. You can choose healing. You can choose forgiveness. You can choose to stop the cycle right now. Expanded affirmations. I forgive myself for loving blindly and I honor the growth that came from it. I release the need to over-explain my worth. My self-blame ends here and my self-trust begins now. I am no longer available for guilt that doesn't belong to me. You didn't cause their inability to commit. Blaming yourself gives away your power. You can reflect without shaming yourself. Self-forgiveness is the foundation of healing. The cycle ends when you choose yourself. They let go. They moved on without a second glance. But now, it's time to come home. Not to them. To you. Because no matter how the story ended, you still wake up in your own body. You still live with your own mind. You still walk this road with yourself. So let's talk about healing the one relationship that matters most. The one between you and you. You've been abandoning yourself, too, without knowing it. Let's be real. For too long, you were waiting on texts. You were prioritizing their needs. You were shrinking to keep them close. But now, it's time to stop ghosting yourself. Ask yourself, when was the last time I asked how I'm doing? When did I last show up for myself the way I show up for others? What do I need that I've been ignoring? Healing starts by turning inward. Real life story, Ray's journey back to himself. Ray spent 8 months in a situationship with someone who kept saying, "I'm not ready for a relationship, but I don't want to lose you." So he stayed. Compromised. Waited. After it ended, he didn't know who he was. He realized he'd built his identity around someone else's confusion. So he did something radical. He booked a solo trip. No explanations. No texting back. And every day on that trip, he asked, "Ray, what do you need from me today?" By day 7, the answer came. Consistency. Respect. Rest. And presence. That was the day he began dating himself and never looked back. How to rebuild trust with yourself. You may not even realize you've broken your own trust. But every time you ignored your intuition, every time you gaslit your own feelings, every time you stayed for fear of being alone, you taught your inner self, "I don't trust you." But here's the good news. That trust can be rebuilt. Here's how. Keep the promises you make to yourself. Stop over-explaining your emotions. Let yourself feel without judgment. Don't abandon yourself when others do. You are no longer the person who has to beg to be seen. You are the one you've been waiting for. You are the safe space you thought they would be. Come home to your own heart. Small daily practices to rebuild the bond with you. Journal what you feel before checking your phone. Start a self-date tradition once a week. Speak to yourself the way you'd speak to a friend in pain. Set boundaries and honor them even when it's hard. Say no without guilt. Take up space, unapologetically. The most important relationship of your life isn't romantic. It's the one you have with the person in the mirror. Affirmations. I am learning to show up for myself with the same love I give others. I trust my intuition again. I deserve peace, even if no one else gives it to me. I am not hard to love, especially by me. I honor the love I've been craving by first giving it to myself. Self-reflection exercise. Mirror letter. Write a letter to yourself. Start with, "Hey, I know we've been distant lately." And then write what you wish someone else had said to you. Tell yourself, you're proud of how far you've come. You see the pain and still believe in your strength. You forgive the versions of you that didn't know better. Then sign it. With love, always, me. Put it on your wall. Read it when you forget. Real life story, Candace and the mirror moment. Candace stood in front of the mirror and said, "I forgive you for staying too long. I forgive you for begging. I forgive you for settling. And I'm proud of you for waking up." She cried. Not out of sadness, but out of recognition. That was the first time she'd seen herself not as broken, but as becoming. You're not broken, you're rebuilding. You're not hard to love, you're learning how to be your own anchor. You're not too sensitive, you're becoming more self-aware. You're not lost, you're being called back home. Let yourself come undone. Let yourself be messy. Let yourself be real. Because the relationship with yourself, it's the longest commitment you'll ever have. Treat it like a sacred thing. Rebuilding self-trust is an act of radical healing. You've been abandoning yourself trying to be loved, now it's time to return. Daily self-devotion rebuilds your sense of identity. The way back to peace is inward, not backward. Loving yourself isn't a trend. It's the foundation. Let's pause for a moment and dream forward. After all the heartbreak, the nights spent overthinking, the days spent rebuilding yourself, you're not just healing. You're preparing. Not for another situationship. Not for someone who makes you question your worth. You're preparing for something sacred. Real love. But what does that mean, to be ready for real love? Let's talk about it. Not the fantasy. Not the fairy tale. But the deep, grounded, soul-aligned kind of love you deserve. First, let's talk about what it's not. Being ready for love isn't about looking perfect, saying all the right things, being completely healed, never feeling fear again. That's perfectionism pretending to be preparation. Being ready is about truth. It's about who you are, not how much you hide. Real love starts when you stop performing. Are you ready for real love? Ask yourself, can I be honest, even when it's uncomfortable? Can I stay open, even after being hurt? Can I let someone love the parts of me I usually hide? Can I receive love, not just give it? Being ready for real love isn't about how much love you can offer. It's about how well you let it in. Real life story, Bree and the quiet room of her heart. Bree used to think love meant proving yourself. She'd bend, shift, and soften to be chosen. But after a long stretch of solitude, something shifted. She said, "I used to want someone to choose me so I could finally rest. Now I want to rest first so that when someone shows up, I'll know I'm not choosing them out of exhaustion." That's what being ready for love means. Not needing someone to fix you, but inviting someone into the space you already feel safe in. The pillars of real love readiness. Self-awareness. You know your wounds, and you no longer let them lead. Boundaries. You say no without guilt. You say yes from clarity. Emotional maturity. You can hold space for discomfort without shutting down. Self-trust. You trust your own voice above someone else's approval. Wholeness. You're not looking for a savior, you're seeking a mirror. Being ready for real love doesn't mean you never feel afraid. It means you no longer abandon yourself when the fear shows up. It means you've stopped chasing love and started attracting it by becoming whole. It means you've finally stopped settling, because you know the love you're waiting for will meet you where you've grown. Self-love practices that prepare you for real love. Speak your truth even when it shakes. Sit with your triggers instead of projecting them. Validate your feelings before seeking it from others. Celebrate your solitude. Practice being deeply seen even by yourself. Love doesn't start when they show up. Love starts with how you show up for you. Real life story, Malik and the moment he knew he was ready. Malik had been single for years. Not because no one wanted him, but because he finally stopped settling. One night, after dinner alone, journaling and reflecting, he wrote, "I used to think being ready for love meant finding someone who made me feel less lonely. Now I know it means being okay with my own company, and not giving that peace away to just anyone." Weeks later, he met someone. Someone who didn't fix his wounds, but honored his healing. That's the energy you deserve. Healing journal prompt: what I want from love now. Ask yourself, what kind of love do I truly desire now? How do I want to feel in my next relationship? What kind of partner do I want to be? What behaviors, patterns, or red flags will I no longer ignore? Get specific. The clearer you get, the stronger your boundaries become. The stronger your boundaries, the closer you are to aligned love. Affirmations. I am preparing for love that doesn't require me to shrink. I am worthy of a relationship built on truth, not performance. I am no longer waiting, I am becoming. The love I seek starts with the way I see myself. Real love will recognize me because I've already become it. Signs you're becoming ready for real love. You enjoy your own company. You no longer chase after mixed signals. You're honest about your triggers. You don't feel behind for being single. You can say, "This isn't for me," and walk away in peace. This is growth. This is preparation. This is power. Being ready for love is about truth, not perfection. It starts by showing up for yourself, first. You are not behind, you are becoming. You don't need fixing, you need space to be seen. Real love will meet you where you've healed and grow with you from there. Let's say it together now. Not as a whisper, but as a truth you finally believe. I wasn't hard to love. They just weren't ready. They couldn't hold it. And that is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their readiness. You didn't love wrong. You didn't show up too much. You weren't too emotional or too intense or too sensitive. You were real. You were brave. You were honest. You offered something sacred, your heart. They couldn't hold the depth, but that's not your shame to carry. Some people are drawn to your light, but don't know what to do with it. They admire your strength, but resent your depth. They crave your love, but fear what it awakens in them. They enjoy your presence, but can't stand the mirror you hold up. So instead of rising to meet you, they leave. Not because you were hard to love, but because real love requires effort, presence, growth. And they weren't ready for that. Real life story, Naomi and the last goodbye. Naomi loved deeply. He said all the right things. She believed in the future they planned together. But slowly, the calls faded. The texts slowed. And one day, he disappeared, no closure, no explanation. She blamed herself. Maybe I was too emotional, she thought. Maybe I scared him. But through therapy, journaling, and solitude, she found the truth. I wasn't too much. He was too used to loving halfway. And I don't do halfway love anymore. Repeat after me, mirror work. My capacity to love deeply is not a flaw. I will no longer apologize for the softness in my soul. I am not for those who choose fear over connection. I am not hard to love, I just require honesty. This is your declaration. This is your freedom. Why they couldn't stay, and why that wasn't about you. Here's what you need to know. They didn't leave because you loved wrong. They left because your love required them to show up. You held space, and they weren't ready to meet you there. People who haven't faced their own wounds will always run from people who reflect truth. And you, dear soul, are a mirror. Not everyone is ready for their reflection. You were not difficult, you were different. You weren't intense, you were honest. You weren't wrong, you were rare. And rare things aren't always held by common hands. Shifting the narrative, from abandonment to alignment. It wasn't abandonment, it was realignment. They exited your story to make space for the kind of love you've always deserved. They left, yes. But they also freed you. From confusion. From false hope. From the exhaustion of carrying both hearts alone. And in that clearing, you returned to yourself. Real life story, Darius and the realization that changed everything. Darius spent months replaying the what ifs. What if he texted back sooner? What if he hadn't opened up too soon? But one day, a friend said, "Bro, you showed up with your heart open. That's the win." Don't mourn someone who didn't even bring their whole self to the table. Darius stopped chasing closure. He created his own. What holding love actually looks like. Consistency, not confusion. Effort, not excuses. Peace, not panic. Clarity, not games. Growth, not guilt. You didn't ask for too much. You asked for what's real. And now you know. You'll never settle for less again. Affirmations. I am worthy of the kind of love that feels like exhale. I release the shame of being misunderstood. The right person will never make me feel like I have to beg for love. I honor my capacity to love and protect it fiercely. They couldn't hold it, but I can hold myself. Healing prompt. Write the letter you'll never send. Write to the one who couldn't love you the way you needed. Say the things you buried. Tell them what your silence held. Not for them, for you. End the letter with, "You didn't break me. You introduced me to the version of me I'd forgotten. And now, I rise." Burn it. Rip it. Release it. This is your goodbye. You weren't hard to love. They just couldn't meet you where you were growing. You didn't lose them, you found yourself. And now, you carry the kind of love that will never abandon you again. You are not responsible for someone else's emotional immaturity. You deserve a love that feels safe, soft, and steady. Your love is powerful, and not everyone can hold it. Their leaving was never your fault. You are not hard to love, you are becoming impossible to forget. To every soul who has walked with me through this journey, thank you. For showing up. For staying. For healing, even when it hurt. For choosing to believe, just one more time, that your heart still matters. If no one has told you today, you are not hard to love. You never were. You simply needed someone who was ready to meet the depth of your spirit, the softness of your soul, and the strength you carry inside. And while they may have left, you remained. You rose. You reclaimed yourself piece by piece, and I am so proud of you. Remember this. The love you gave was real. The pain you felt was valid. But the story isn't over, it's just beginning. You weren't too much. They just weren't ready. But now, you are. And that changes everything. Follow at Mindful Media 101.